So hopefully VCE students would have gone through all these questions in their revision program. I'm just putting a bit of final emphasis on some of the tricky parts of the course. So question 27 from last year's VCAA sample exam, multi-choice, the dimensional approach to classifying mental disorders. Higher inter-rater reliability, well, that would refer to a categorical approach, so the opposite is true. Provides a label for a person's mental disorder. No, it doesn't. Categorical approach is more likely to lead to a label. Dimensional grades of severity. Assists psychologists to decide whether a person has a mental disorder or not. Well, that's referring to the diagnosis, which again, the categorical approach does. So again, for C, the opposite's true. Recognises the symptoms of mental illness along a continuum, which may change over time, so that's referring to the transitional aspect of the dimensional approach. So D is correct. So this question looks fairly simple, it's not very wordy. Explain how the biopsychosocial framework has changed the way health professionals consider health and well-being. We need a bit of detail here. So 1 mark for any of the following points made. Mental and physical health are now seen as united concepts. It looks at the interaction, and you've got to mention all three: biological, psychological and sociocultural. Finally, you could identify that it's a functional model rather than a static medical model. So this is a fairly worded question, so this is the type of thing you should look out for in your reading time. Serena has been nursing her elderly mother Rita, who has Alzheimer's, for 4 years. Serena finds that caring for her mother takes much of her time, and she often feels tired, very tired at the end of the day when her mother is finally in bed. Serena feels that she is trapped by this situation because she has no other family members who are able to assist her in the care of Rita. Recently, she has found that she's been unable to overcome a head cold, which she has had for 2 months, and is unable to sleep. She worries much about what will become of her mother if she can no longer care for her. So, key points here: she's unable to overcome head cold, she's had it for 2 months, unable to sleep, she's worrying, and she can no longer care for her. So, A, C and D are all part of the alarm stage, where we first become aware of the stressor. The answer is, of course, B. She's showing signs of wear and tear, as indicated by the fact that she can't sleep, she's had a head cold for 2 months, and she can no longer care for her mum. While waiting to audition for a play, Gareth constantly told himself, "I'm not feeling stressed, I'm not feeling stressed, I'm not feeling stressed." According to the T model of stress and coping, his self-talk is an example of. Well, A and B refer to the initial interpretation of the stressor, and he's gone beyond that because of his actual self-talk. So clearly not an appraisal. Now, if in the scenario it referred to him managing the stressor, so for instance he could do that by saying, "I am stressed, but I've been stressed before and I've always managed to nail my lines, so therefore my stress isn't a bad thing, it's not going to impair my performance," then you could talk about it being problem-focused coping. But because he's basically in denial, i.e. he's distancing himself from the problem, that's an indication that he's not managing the problem, so therefore the answer is emotion-focused coping. So sticking with the T model of stress and coping, we've got to relate this response to the primary appraisal, which is the key aspect of this question. So Stella's 17, she's doing VCE, she's feeling overwhelmed. She's having difficulty sleeping. Audrey is enjoying Year 12 and finding it challenging but manageable. Now, to get the marks here, you've got to do two things. One, you've got to identify the terminology that Lazarus and Folkman used for primary appraisal. So the options are threat, harm, challenge, irrelevant, benign, positive. You could throw that in if applicable. And 2, you've got to link your response to the scenario, and the scenario being Stella and her feeling of overwhelmed, or Audrey finding it challenging but manageable. So 1 mark for saying, perceiving it as a threat, the link, she's overwhelmed. Or 1 mark for saying harm, and then a 2nd mark for saying this harm will occur in the future or now. 1 mark for saying that Audrey's finding it challenging, and then 1 mark for the link, i.e. she can actually gain from the Year 12 experience. Or 1 mark for saying that it's irrelevant, actually using that terminology, and 1 mark for your link to the scenario, situation initially assessed as irrelevant. Now this looks like a pretty simple question because it's not very wordy, but students lacked detail in explaining how you could actually use biofeedback to help reduce your stress. So you got 1 mark if you talked about being given information, so feedback, about an autonomic physiological response. So that's a biological component. An example would be good here, and it needs to be an example that you could actually control through relaxation strategies, so heart rate, blood pressure, muscle tension, something like that. The 2nd mark relates to the relaxation strategies employed that you would use to actually ultimately control that physiological response to the stressor. And the 3rd mark, which hardly anyone got, is talking about the continued presentation of this biological information to help you gain control over your stress response. Allostasis is a process whereby A, the body's resources are depleted. Well, that's actually referring to allostatic load. The brain directs the body to maintain stability by rejecting. No, the opposite's true, so that rules out B. The body directs the brain to maintain stability. The opposite is true, so we can rule that one out. So C is, of course, the answer. The brain directs the body to maintain stability by adapting to changes caused by the stressor. For example, our heart rate will go up, which will enable our muscles to receive an increased supply of blood without causing any damage, so that therefore we can actually maintain stability because our muscles aren't deprived of the necessary blood or oxygen they need. GABA is a neurotransmitter that can be used in the management of aphobic anxiety. Janet could be treated with a medication that increases the amount of GABA available in the brain. So we're talking about benzodiazepines here. In terms of A and C becoming sleepy or numbing the muscles, benzodiazepines aren't tranquilizers. They don't anesthetize you. So the actual effect of them is a calming effect, not quite to the extreme of A or C. The problem with D, increasing the production of neurotransmitters, benzodiazepines actually have a inhibitory effect on the major excitatory neurotransmitters that are released when we're exposed to the phobic stimulus. So we're talking about, say, glutamate and dopamine here. So the actual Valium or Xanax or whatever you're taking doesn't actually increase the production of the neurotransmitter. It merely mimics the effects of that by having an agonistic effect at the postsynaptic neuron. So B is our answer. The Valium or Xanax or whatever the benzodiazepine is, it relaxes her, it reduces some of her physiological responses to the phobic stimulus, e.g. reduction in muscle tension. Last question. Michaela is 9, she's scared of spiders, she feels anxious. Outline the role of GABA in the medical management. So similar to the last question I just did. So you get 1 mark for explaining how GABA would ideally work in this scenario. So she's got reduced levels, and GABA of course has that inhibitory effect on her physiological response to the exposure to the phobic stimulus, spiders in this case, and make sure you link your response to the scenario given, spiders in this case. So the 2nd mark for talking about how the benzos work, you didn't have to mention them, you just say that they mimic the effects of the GABA, which therefore inhibits the physiological response, i.e. increased heart rate, etc., when she's actually exposed to the phobic stimulus. So look, I hope this has helped. If I can't bang out another clip in the next few hours, good luck to everyone tomorrow, and thanks for all your support, the positive comments, the Gmails that I've got, etc. So it's been good working with you. Cheers.